There's a rare kind of strength that can't be built in a gym. You can't see it in a mirror, but when you have it, nothing can break you. Not rejection, not criticism, not even failure. Imagine waking up every morning knowing that no one, not their words, their judgments, or their opinions, can shake your peace. That kind of power doesn't come from luck. It comes from mastering your mind. This is how people like Napoleon Hill describe true success. Not just wealth or fame, but the unshakable calm that comes from inner strength. And today, your training begins. Part 1. The power of inner strength. When you look around, you'll notice something. The strongest people in life aren't the ones who've had it easy. They've faced heartbreak, rejection, and failure just like everyone else. The difference is, they've learned how to rise above it. They've built armor around their minds so powerful that no insult can pierce it, no setback can break it, and no storm can destroy their peace. In his teachings, Napoleon Hill said, "Strength and growth come only through continuous effort and struggle." Inner strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, piece by piece. Every day you refuse to let the world control how you feel. Let me tell you a story. In a small town in the early 1900s, there was a young man named Henry Collins. Henry wasn't rich or powerful. In fact, he worked long hours at a dusty steel mill and barely made enough to get by. He dreamed of starting his own business one day, but people laughed at him. "You're too simple for that," they'd say. "Stick to your job." At first, their words crushed him. Every insult felt like a punch. Every rejection made him smaller. He'd go home at night, sit by his worn-out lamp, and replay their voices in his head until he couldn't sleep. But one night, while flipping through an old newspaper, he came across a quote that stopped him cold. "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." That sentence hit him like lightning. It made him realize something powerful. He had been giving away his peace to people who hadn't earned it. Every time he let their words hurt him, he was handing them control over his emotions. That night, Henry made a promise to himself. He said, "From this day forward, no one decides how I feel but me." And from that day on, his life began to change. When people mocked him, he stayed calm. When things went wrong, he reminded himself, "I control my reaction." At first, it was hard. His emotions still burned inside. But he practiced daily, just like an athlete trains their muscles, until his mind became strong. He started reading books on success, including Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. Hill's words taught him that real power doesn't come from controlling the world, it comes from controlling yourself. Henry realized he couldn't stop people from judging him, but he could stop their judgments from reaching his heart. He began treating every challenge as a lesson. Every insult became a workout for his mind. Every rejection became a teacher. Months passed, and something amazing happened. Henry's calmness started to draw people toward him. The same coworkers who once mocked him began asking for his advice. His steady energy made others trust him. When the mill eventually closed and workers panicked, Henry stayed centered. Instead of falling into fear, he saw an opportunity. He pooled his savings, bought old equipment, and started his own small ironworks business. Within a few years, that business grew into one of the most respected workshops in town. Henry didn't succeed because the world suddenly became kinder. He succeeded because he stopped letting the world shake him. That's what inner strength looks like. It's not about pretending nothing hurts, it's about not letting pain control your decisions. Napoleon Hill believed that every person has two worlds, the outer world that we can't control, and the inner world that we can. Most people spend their lives reacting to the outer world. When someone criticizes them, they get angry. When life gets hard, they lose hope. When others panic, they panic too. But the few who master their inner world live differently. They understand that peace is an inside job. Hill called this state of mind a definite purpose. It's when you're so focused on your goal, your values, and your peace, that nothing outside of you can shake what's inside of you. That's when your emotions start working for you, not against you. Think of your mind as a fortress. Inside those walls live your peace, confidence, and happiness. Outside, the world will always be noisy, full of opinions, gossip, rejection, and chaos. If you build strong walls, the noise stays outside. But if you leave the gates open, every insult and problem will rush in and tear your peace apart. Henry built his walls, and so can you. Here's the truth. Every time you choose calm over anger, Every time you refuse to argue with negativity, every time you walk away instead of fighting to prove yourself, you are laying another brick in your fortress. You become harder to offend. You stop reacting to every opinion. You start thinking clearly even when others lose control. This is the power of inner strength. When you master this, your life changes in ways you can't imagine. You'll make better decisions because emotions won't cloud your judgment. You'll build stronger relationships because you won't react to every small disagreement. You'll chase your dreams with focus and courage because failure won't scare you anymore. And when people ask, "Why doesn't anything bother you?" you'll just smile, because you'll know the secret. The world didn't get easier. You got stronger. This is your first step toward becoming unbreakable. In the next part, we'll dive into what truly controls your mind, and how to take back control from every outside influence that tries to steal your peace. Because the moment you master your thoughts, you master your life. End of part 1. The power of inner strength. Would you like me to continue with part 2, understanding what controls your mind? 1,000 words, same story style and tone? Title: The Unbreakable Mind, Part 2, The Writer of the Mind Hook. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, not to see your face, but to see your thoughts. Every fear, every doubt, every spark of confidence reflected right back at you. Now, imagine realizing that these thoughts are not you. They are only visitors. And the moment you learn to master them, your entire world changes. Napoleon Hill taught that the mind is man's greatest power, if he controls it. But if the mind controls him, it becomes his greatest prison. Today, you'll learn how to take back the reins of your mind and ride it toward peace, success, and strength that no one can break. Part 2. The Writer of the Mind. There once was a young woman named Clara Jennings, who lived in Ohio in the 1930s. Clara worked in a textile mill. Every day she listened to the endless noise of machines, the constant chatter of coworkers, and the unkind words of a supervisor who seemed to find joy in making others feel small. For years, Clara went home defeated. She'd lie in bed replaying every insult, every criticism, every look of disapproval. Her mind never rested. It was as if she carried the factory noise inside her head long after she'd left. One evening, after another long day, Clara stumbled upon a small, worn book at a second-hand shop. The title caught her eye, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. She bought it for 25 cents, money she could barely spare, but something in her told her it might be important. That night, under the dim light of her lamp, Clara began to read. Hill's words spoke directly to her heart. You have absolute control over only one thing, your thoughts. She reread that line over and over again. Absolute control over your thoughts. Could that really be true? Could she choose peace, even when her boss yelled? Could she decide not to feel small when others mocked her? Hill compared the mind to a garden. What you plant grows. Clara realized her mental garden was full of weeds, anger, worry, and fear planted by others. She had let everyone else choose what grew in her mind. That night, she made a promise. From now on, she whispered, I'll be the gardener. The next morning, she walked into the mill, and something small but powerful shifted inside her. When her supervisor scolded her, she took a deep breath. Instead of reacting, she asked herself, do I really want to let his words grow in my mind? She decided no. She imagined his words as seeds falling on dry ground, unable to take root. At first, it was hard. Her mind still raced with anger and worry. But Clara remembered another lesson from Hill. Thoughts mixed with emotion become magnetized. If she kept fueling her negative thoughts with emotion, they would only grow stronger. So she practiced awareness. Each time a negative thought appeared, she didn't fight it. She just watched it, like watching clouds drift by. She said to herself, I am not my thoughts. I am the thinker. That simple statement became her daily armor. It separated her from the noise in her head. When she felt anxious, she'd stop and say, This is just a thought. It will pass. Over time, Clara noticed something beautiful happening. Her peace returned. She started smiling more. Her work improved. Her supervisor, noticing her calm, gave her more responsibility. Within a year, she was promoted, but it wasn't luck. It was mastery. Clara had learned the secret Napoleon Hill taught so clearly. Your thoughts create your feelings. Your feelings shape your actions. Your actions build your results. Control your thoughts, and you control your destiny. Hill once said that most people's minds are like wild horses, untrained, restless, running wherever emotion drives them. Clara understood that now. Her mind had been a wild horse for years, racing with worry, kicking with anger, stopping with sadness. But now she was becoming the rider. When she felt her thoughts gallop toward fear, she gently guided them back toward peace. When anger tried to take control, she pulled on the reins of reason. Each day, she practiced steering her thoughts with patience. That's when she began to see how powerful awareness truly is. Awareness is the space between you and your thoughts. The moment you realize you have a choice. Clara began to picture herself sitting in a movie theater, watching her thoughts play out on the screen. Instead of being the actress in the chaos, she became the audience observing it. She noticed how some thoughts made her body tense. Others made her feel hopeful. Slowly, she began keeping only the thoughts that lifted her up. She pulled the weeds and watered the flowers. This mental gardening became her daily ritual. And here's what's magical about that. Once you become aware of your thoughts, they lose control over you. The insults, the criticism, the rejection, all lose their power when you realize you don't have to believe them. You are the one who chooses what stays. By the end of that year, Clara wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. She had found a deep sense of calm that no one could take from her. She began helping other women in the factory learn the same principles. She'd say, "Ladies, you can't stop people from talking, but you can stop letting their words live rent-free in your mind." They'd laugh, but they saw something in Clara they wanted, a steady peace, a quiet confidence. She became known as the calm one. Even in the loudest room. Clara's story spread through her small town. Years later, when she opened her own sewing business, she hung a sign above her desk that read, "Control your thoughts, and your destiny will follow." It reminded her daily of the truth Napoleon Hill had taught her, that the mind, when mastered, becomes your greatest servant, but when ignored, becomes your harshest master. You, too, can become the rider of your mind. Start by watching your thoughts as they come and go. Do not judge them, just observe them. The more you watch, the more you'll realize you are separate from them. You'll see that every negative thought loses strength when you don't feed it attention. When your thoughts race with worry, guide them toward gratitude. When they kick with anger, steer them toward patience. When they stop with fear, encourage them with courage. Each time you do this, you tighten your grip on the reins. You become stronger. And one day, without realizing it, you'll notice something incredible. The horse that once dragged you through storms now walks calmly beside you, waiting for your direction. That's the power of mastering your thoughts. That's the power of being the rider. In the next part, you'll learn the secret art that separates the wise from the weak. The art of not reacting. Because the moment you stop reacting to life, and start responding to it, your power multiplies beyond measure. End of part 2. The Rider of the Mind. Would you like me to continue with part 3, The Art of Not Reacting, 1000 words, same Napoleon Hill, inspired story style? Title, The Unbreakable Mind, Part 3, The Fire Within. Hook. Have you ever met someone who seemed calm in chaos? Someone who didn't break when life tried to crush them? You might have wondered, what makes them so strong? It's not luck. It's not that their life is easier. It's something far more powerful, inner strength. Napoleon Hill once said, "Strength and growth come only through continuous effort and struggle." Real power doesn't shout. It glows quietly, deep inside, like a fire that never goes out. Today, you'll discover how to find that fire within you, and how to make it burn so bright that nothing in life can ever put it out. Part 3. The Fire Within. In a small steel town in Pennsylvania during the 1940s lived a man named Robert Hayes. Robert was an ordinary worker, a welder in the local factory. His hands were rough, his back ached from long shifts, and his pay barely covered rent and food for his family. Life hadn't been kind to Robert. His father died when he was a boy, and he'd been working since he was 12. By 35, he had faced more hardship than most men could bear. But what made Robert different was not his struggle, it was his strength. People in town called him Ironheart Hayes, not because of his job, but because of how he handled life. When the factory burned down in 1946, most workers panicked, unsure how they'd feed their families. But Robert didn't panic. He gathered the men, looked them in the eyes, and said, "We can build it again. We've built harder things before." He spoke with quiet certainty. The kind that doesn't come from arrogance, but from experience. That moment changed the way people saw him. And when asked later how he stayed so calm, Robert smiled and said something that sounded straight out of a Napoleon Hill book. You can't control the wind, but you can always tend your own fire. Robert explained that his strength didn't come from being fearless. It came from learning to act despite fear. Real strength, he said, isn't about never falling down. It's about getting up every time you do. He told his son one evening as they sat by the fireplace. People think strength is about muscles or money or never crying. But true strength lives in silence, deep inside you. It's the fire that keeps burning even when the world turns cold. Robert had learned that lesson years earlier when the Great Depression hit. He had lost everything: his job, his home, and his pride. For a few weeks, he lived in a shelter. Every night, he'd sit by a dying fire and watch the last flickers of flame fade into the dark. And then one night, he realized something that changed his life. The fire only went out when no one fed it. That was the moment he decided, no matter how bad life got, he would never let the fire inside him die. From then on, every challenge became fuel. When he was afraid, he faced it. When he was hurt, he healed. When he failed, he tried again. He stopped expecting life to be easy and started using difficulty as training. Napoleon Hill taught the same principle. Every adversity carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Robert lived by that truth. When others complained about hard times, he said, "Good. Hard times build strong men." Each day he pushed himself just a little more, to do the right thing when it was hard, to speak kindly when angry, to work when tired. Every act of courage, no matter how small, became a brick in the foundation of his inner strength. And the result? Robert became a man no one could break. Years later, when his wife fell ill, people expected him to crumble. Instead, he grew even stronger. He said, "If the fire inside me stays lit, we can get through any storm." He cared for her night and day, smiling through exhaustion. His neighbors often saw him carrying her to the porch so she could watch the sunset. "She likes the light," he'd say softly. "And so do I." Robert's strength wasn't loud. It didn't demand attention. It showed in how he stood tall, even when the weight of the world was on his shoulders. It was in his calm tone, his steady hands, and his faith that no matter what happened, he could handle it. True strength, he would say, is not the absence of fear, it's courage in the presence of fear. It's choosing to rise even when it hurts. It's facing the storm and saying, "I will not break." And this is where his story becomes your lesson. The same fire that burned in Robert Hayes burns in you. You've already proved it. Every hardship you faced, every night you thought you couldn't make it but did, every time you got back up when life knocked you down. That's your fire. It never left you. It's waiting for you to feed it again. How do you feed it? You feed it with courage. Every time you do something hard instead of avoiding it, your fire grows. You feed it with persistence. Every time you keep going when you want to quit, your fire grows stronger. You feed it with integrity. Every time you do what's right instead of what's easy, your fire glows brighter. The fire within you doesn't come from outside approval. It doesn't depend on what people say or what you own. It's built by your actions, by the quiet choices you make when no one is watching. You can lose everything, your job, your money, even your freedom. But as long as you don't give up your inner strength, no one can truly defeat you. When you finally understand that, you stop chasing validation. You stop fearing failure. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You realize you already have everything you need inside you. You start walking taller, speaking more clearly, and living with quiet confidence. Because when you trust yourself, the world begins to trust you too. Napoleon Hill once said, "The man who masters himself can master anything." And mastering yourself means believing that your power comes from within, not from circumstances. You won't always be perfect. You'll stumble. You'll make mistakes. But every time you rise again, your fire grows stronger. So the next time you feel weak, remember Robert Hayes. Remember that small flame he refused to let die. Remember that inside you burns the same unbreakable fire. It doesn't matter where you come from, what you've lost, or how dark it feels right now, your fire still burns. You just have to choose to feed it. Feed it with effort. Feed it with hope. Feed it with faith. And when life tries to blow you out, stand tall, look the storm in the eye, and whisper to yourself, My fire burns brighter than this. Because it does. Because it always has. And because once you master that inner flame, nothing in the world can ever extinguish it again. Would you like me to continue with Part 4, building the walls that protect your peace in the same Napoleon Hill inspired story style, 1,000 words? Part 4. The fortress within the night after Jonathan's discovery was one he would never forget. The old Rutledge Manor groaned under the weight of time and secrets. Wind rushed through the halls like a whispering spirit, carrying fragments of long-buried pain. In the faint glow of the candle, Jonathan read through the final pages of his ancestor's journal, the pages that spoke of the fortress of the mind. The secret said to have saved the last surviving Rutledge from madness. The words seemed simple but powerful. Build within yourself a fortress that no curse can break, no evil can enter, and no fear can command. Jonathan did not understand it at first. How could a fortress of the mind protect against the horrors that stalked his family for generations? Yet as he read, he began to see what Napoleon Hill once taught, that the greatest strength lies not in muscle or money, but in mastery of one's own thoughts. Outside, the storm howled as if mocking his realization. The shadows seemed to move across the walls, twisting into faces that weren't there before. He heard faint laughter, the same ghostly sound that had haunted his childhood dreams. Jonathan stood, his pulse racing, yet something deep within him refused to break this time. He whispered to himself, "I am stronger than fear. I command my thoughts." For a moment, the air in the room seemed to still. The candle's flame steadied, and the whispering laughter faded. Jonathan's heart slowed. He realized the curse did not only haunt the manor, it fed on weakness, on doubt, on the very fear it inspired. Every generation of Rutledges had fallen because they allowed the fear to rule them. But what if he refused to bow to it? Determined, Jonathan went to the attic. The place had been locked for decades, sealed after his grandfather's mysterious death. The key, cold and ancient, turned with a hesitant click. As the door opened, the air hit him like ice. The attic smelled of dust and forgotten memories. Old portraits lined the walls, eyes that seemed alive in the flickering candlelight. In the center of the room stood a massive trunk. Its iron edges were rusted, its leather surface cracked by time. On the lid, engraved in faded letters, were the words, "To face the curse, face thyself." Jonathan hesitated. Every part of him wanted to turn back, but a stronger part urged him on, the part that believed this was his test, his trial of inner strength. When he opened the trunk, he found a mirror. Its frame was carved from dark oak, polished though untouched by light. But the reflection was wrong. It showed not just his face but also another version of him, hollow-eyed, fearful, trembling. The reflection spoke. "You think you can end it?" the shadow Jonathan said. "You are just like them, weak, afraid, cursed." Jonathan felt the familiar wave of dread rise inside him. His ancestors had faced this same darkness and failed. The journal had warned of it, a manifestation of one's deepest fears, born from the curse itself. Yet this time, Jonathan remembered the words he had read. "Your mind is your fortress. No fear can command unless you allow it." He took a step closer to the mirror. "You're not real," he said firmly. "You're what the curse wants me to believe." The reflection sneered. "Without fear you are nothing. Without doubt you would not be human." Jonathan took another step forward. "Maybe so," he said. "But I choose which thoughts stay and which leave. You are fear. And I am done feeding you." The mirror began to shake. Cracks spread across the glass like veins of light. The reflection screamed as if torn apart from within. Jonathan stood his ground, refusing to flinch. The sound grew louder until the mirror shattered into pieces that scattered across the floor. The attic fell silent, and then came the whispers again, but softer this time, voices that no longer mocked, but thanked. It was as if generations of trapped souls were finally released. Jonathan knelt beside the fragments, breathing heavily. In each broken piece, his reflection looked calm, peaceful, whole. He understood now. The curse had never been a ghost or demon, not in the ordinary sense. It was the legacy of fear passed from one Rutledge to the next, a cycle of weakness taught by the pain of the past. Each ancestor had failed because they let fear own their thoughts. But Jonathan had broken the chain by taking back control of his mind. As the first light of dawn crept through the attic window, Jonathan felt warmth instead of dread. The manor was still old, still creaking, but the heaviness that had clung to it for centuries was gone. He descended the stairs, feeling as if the house itself exhaled in relief. The portraits on the walls seemed different now, less sorrowful, more at peace. That morning, he wrote in his ancestors' journal, continuing the story that had begun generations before. "The true fortress is not built of stone or steel," he wrote. "It is built from thoughts that serve you, not destroy you. It is guarded by faith, not fear." He closed the book, placing it on the mantel where the light could reach it. Outside, the storm clouds broke apart, revealing a clear sky. For the first time in his life, Jonathan felt truly free. The curse had not been broken by ritual or exorcism, but by strength of mind, the power his ancestors had forgotten to use. Later that day, as he walked through the fields behind the manor, he noticed how quiet everything had become. The land felt alive again, breathing under the morning sun. He smiled, realizing that true peace did not come from escaping darkness but mastering it. Still, he knew this was not the end of his journey. The lesson his family had paid for with centuries of suffering was one he now carried forward, to teach others how to build their own fortress within. To remind the world that no matter what haunts you, the real power lies in the thoughts you choose to believe. That night, as the moon rose above the manor, Jonathan stood at his window and whispered the words that had saved him. "Nothing outside can touch the strength I've built within." And somewhere deep in the house, the wind carried back a whisper, not of torment this time, but of gratitude. The curse was finally still. End of Part 4. Part 5. The shadows returned. The peace at Rutledge Manor did not last. For several months after Jonathan shattered the cursed mirror, life felt lighter, almost serene. The servants no longer whispered of strange sounds at night, and the thick fog that once rolled endlessly over the estate seemed to lift. Jonathan spent his mornings restoring old rooms and his evenings studying his ancestors' journals. But as winter deepened, the warmth he had felt began to fade. It started with the dreams. At first, they were faint and easily forgotten by dawn. He would wake with a feeling of unease, unable to recall what had frightened him. Then the dreams grew stronger. Each night, he found himself walking through the manor's corridors, only this time everything was reversed. The portraits stared at him with hollow eyes, the chandeliers dripped with dark liquid, and behind every door, something waited. In one dream, he came upon the mirror he had destroyed. It was whole again. His reflection smiled, but it was not his own smile. It was cruel and knowing. The reflection whispered, "Did you think fear dies so easily?" Jonathan woke, with a start, drenched in sweat, the sound of laughter echoing faintly in his ears. He told himself it was just his mind adjusting to the quiet after so many years of torment. He reminded himself of what he had learned, the fortress within. Yet the dreams continued, growing more vivid and real. Then the cold spots returned. At first in the hallways, then in his room. The air would drop suddenly, the candle flames would flicker, and whispers would float through the dark. One evening, as snow fell thick outside, Jonathan invited the village historian, Father Alden, to dinner. The priest was an elderly man who had studied the Rutledge Curse his entire life. He listened patiently as Jonathan described his visions and strange sensations. When Jonathan finished, the old man leaned forward, his expression grave. "Evil never dies," Father Alden said quietly. "It only sleeps until the door is opened again. You may have broken the chain of fear in your mind, but the house itself remembers. The curse has soaked into the very stones of this manor." Jonathan frowned. "But I faced it. I saw what it was. I broke it." "You broke your part," the priest said. "But your ancestors' fear left roots deep in this place. You cannot burn away centuries of darkness in one night." That night, after the priest left, Jonathan could not sleep. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows like angry hands. He decided to walk the halls, hoping movement would calm him. As he passed the portrait gallery, he stopped. The painting of his great-grandfather, once calm and stern, now seemed twisted. The eyes glowed faintly in the candlelight. Jonathan stepped closer, telling himself it was only an illusion. Then, the mouth of the painted man curved into a slow smile. Jonathan stumbled back, dropping his candle. Darkness swallowed the corridor. The smile lingered, faint but visible, lit by the dying flame. His heart pounded as he reached for the candle and relit it. When the light returned, the portrait was normal again. But the fear inside him was real. The next day, he searched the manor's library for answers. Hidden among the oldest books, he found one bound in cracked leather. The title read, Testament of the First Rutledge. Inside were pages describing a ritual, an agreement made generations ago. It told of a pact between the first Rutledge patriarch and a shadow spirit who promised wealth and protection in exchange for a line of fear. Each generation would feed the spirit through its terror, and in return, the family would prosper. Jonathan read in disbelief. The curse was not a punishment. It was a contract. And by breaking it, he had not ended the power but angered the entity that had fed on the Rutledge bloodline for centuries. That night, the dreams turned violent. He saw his ancestors again, each one kneeling before a dark shape with no face. Its voice was the sound of wind through stone. Fear is mine, it said. It has always been mine. When Jonathan tried to speak, his voice failed. The shadow moved closer, its form towering over him. You cannot destroy what was promised. He woke to the sound of footsteps in the hall. Slow, deliberate steps. He rose, took the lantern from his nightstand, and opened the door. The hallway was empty, yet the sound continued, echoing from below. Against every instinct, he followed. Down the staircase, across the foyer, and into the great hall. The sound stopped when he entered. At the far end of the room, where moonlight streamed through cracked windows, stood a figure. It was a man, no, a shadow shaped like one, dressed in an old Rutledge coat. Jonathan's breath caught as he recognized the face. It was his ancestor, the one who had made the pact. The eyes were dark pits, and from his lips came the same cold whisper that haunted Jonathan's dreams. You think you broke the curse, the apparition said. You only broke the chains that bound it to fear. Now it walks free. Jonathan's hand trembled, the lantern flickering. I will not fear you, he said. You no longer have power over me. The ghost smiled faintly. You misunderstand. Fear was your protection. Without it, you are unguarded. The spirit does not need your fear anymore. It needs your soul. Before Jonathan could move, the lantern went out. Darkness swallowed everything. In the silence, he heard the whisper again, closer now, circling him. You built your fortress within, but you forgot the door behind you. He ran, guided only by instinct. The halls twisted around him like a maze. Doors that should have led to safety opened into endless corridors. The manor itself seemed alive, rearranging its shape to trap him. His heart thundered, but even through the panic, a voice inside reminded him of his strength. Your mind is your fortress. No fear can command unless you allow it. He stopped running. He took a breath. This is illusion, he said aloud. This house, this curse, this darkness, it feeds on belief. It cannot hurt what it cannot control. Silence followed. Then, slowly, the cold air began to fade. The corridor straightened, the lights flickered back to life. The manor grew still again. Jonathan fell to his knees, exhausted but alive. In that moment, he understood the full truth. The fortress within was not built once and left standing. It had to be rebuilt every day, each time fear tried to take hold. Strength was not something gained forever. It was something practiced. Like faith. As dawn broke once more over Rutledge Manor, Jonathan stood at the window and watched the snow melt from the fields. He knew the spirit was not gone. It would return whenever weakness found him. But he also knew he was ready. For the first time, he understood what his ancestors could not, that no darkness, no curse, no ancient pact could touch a man who commanded his own mind. Still, somewhere deep within the manor, a faint whisper lingered, a reminder that the story was not yet over. End of Part 5. Part 6. The final night at Rutledge Manor. Winter turned to spring, and the heavy silence that had haunted Rutledge Manor softened. The air was lighter now. The frost on the windows melted into streaks of sunlight, and the sound of life returned to the fields. But within the manor's ancient walls, something still stirred. Jonathan felt it in his dreams, a presence watching and waiting. The whispers had grown quiet, but quietness in Rutledge Manor had never meant peace. It meant the storm was gathering again. He had learned much about the curse. The spirit that haunted the Rutledge bloodline was not merely a ghost but a manifestation of centuries of fear and guilt. His ancestors had invited it, fed it, and bound their lives to it. Jonathan had broken that chain, but the spirit remained, drifting between worlds, restless and hungry. He knew it would come for him one last time. The signs began subtly. At night, the candles refused to stay lit. The clock stopped at the same hour, midnight, and stayed frozen until dawn. The portraits in the great hall grew darker, their faces sinking into shadow as though time itself was draining from them. Even the servants had grown uneasy and begged Jonathan to leave the manor for good. But he could not. Something inside him refused to run. He felt the weight of generations behind him, urging him to finish what no Rutledge before him had ever dared. One evening, Jonathan sat in his study surrounded by his ancestors' journals. The last entry from the first Rutledge caught his eye. It spoke of a night of reckoning, a final confrontation meant to seal the pact forever. The words were written in trembling ink: when the blood of the last heir meets the shadow, one must surrender. The line will either fall or be freed. Jonathan read the sentence again and again until its meaning settled coldly in his chest. The spirit wanted the last Rutledge to offer himself. Only through that sacrifice could the curse be ended, or renewed. He realized the choice was his alone. That night, the storm returned. It rolled over the hills with thunder that shook the manor's foundations. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the walls where cracks seemed to pulse with dark light. Jonathan knew it was time. He took a single candle and descended into the cellar where the first pact had been sealed centuries before. The air down there was thick and damp, heavy with the scent of earth and decay. The stones glistened with moisture, and strange symbols carved long ago seemed to move under the candle's flickering flame. In the center of the floor was the broken altar, the place where fear itself had been born into his family's legacy. As the wind howled outside, Jonathan felt the temperature drop sharply. His breath came out in white clouds. From the shadows at the edge of the room, something began to take shape. It rose like smoke curling upward, then solidified into a tall, dark figure. Its face was a blur of shifting shapes, sometimes his father, sometimes his great-grandfather, sometimes his own reflection. Its voice was a whisper that filled every corner of the cellar. "Jonathan Rutledge," it said. "The line ends tonight." Jonathan stepped forward, heart pounding but voice steady. "Yes. It ends tonight, but not in your way." The shadow laughed softly, the sound like dry leaves scraping stone. "You think you are free? You broke the pact, but fear is your inheritance. It flows in your blood. You cannot destroy what you are." Jonathan raised the candle. The flame burned bright and golden, fighting the darkness that pressed around him. "You are not my inheritance," he said. "You are a lie my family believed in. You lived because they feared you. But I do not fear you anymore." The shadow hissed. The walls trembled. The candle flickered wildly, its light almost swallowed by the darkness. The figure's shape twisted, stretching toward him. "Fear is truth," it whispered. "Without fear you are nothing." Jonathan closed his eyes. He remembered the lessons he had learned, the fortress within, the pause before reaction, the strength born from pain. He had built his inner walls brick by brick, and now he stood behind them unshaken. He took a deep breath and said calmly, "Fear is only a shadow, and shadows vanish when light endures." The candle flame flared as though answering him. It grew taller, brighter, until its glow filled the room. The shadow screamed, the sound echoing like 1,000 voices crying out from the walls. The light cut through the darkness, burning it away piece by piece until only a thin mist remained. Jonathan felt heat rush through him, not pain, but release. When the light faded, the cellar was still. The air was warm again, the walls silent. The altar had crumbled into dust. Jonathan sank to his knees, his chest heaving, tears streaming down his face. He felt no fear, only peace. For the first time since the manor was built, the air was free of its curse. He stayed there until dawn. When he finally climbed the stairs, the morning sun filled the great hall with golden light. The portraits no longer looked grim. The colors had softened, and their faces seemed at rest. Outside, the wind was gentle, carrying the scent of spring flowers. The manor, once heavy with dread, now stood quietly, like an old soldier finally laid to rest. Jonathan packed a few belongings and stepped outside. As he looked back at the towering house, He felt no attachment, no sorrow, only gratitude. The Rutledge curse was over, and the spirit was gone. The land, the house, even the family name could finally breathe again. He knew he would never return. Some stories, once closed, must stay buried. Years later, people in the nearby village would speak of the man who broke the curse. They said on certain nights, when the moon was full, lights still glowed faintly from the manor's windows, as though someone inside kept a single candle burning in remembrance. But no one feared it anymore. The fear had died with the shadow, and in its place grew peace. Jonathan never sought recognition. He lived quietly, writing about his family's history and teaching others that real evil begins within the mind and ends only when courage takes its place. He told them the greatest victory is not in fighting ghosts, but in conquering the fears that give them power. In the end, the legacy of Rutledge Manor was not one of horror but of transformation. A family once cursed by darkness had found light through a single man's strength of spirit. And though time would eventually erase the house and its memories, the lesson remained: fear dies when courage refuses to feed it. The story of Rutledge Manor closed at sunrise, the light pouring through shattered windows, touching every corner where shadows once ruled. The curse was broken forever. If you enjoyed The Rutledge Curse, don't forget to subscribe for more dark historical tales, share this story with those who love eerie legends, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps the fire of storytelling alive.